we think about a lot as a soulmate being someone who is someone I'm supposed to be with eternally forever. And the reason I'm bringing this up is actually because I taught this two series class in my EFC workshop, which is dating and creating connection. And the concept of a soulmate matches, like, links into this concept of dating, right? And this dating and creating connection that we're talking about, because unconsciously all of us have this programming and this conditioning to want to be able to latch onto a soulmate and have someone for the rest of our lives. And that's what we call our soulmate. I remember when I was young and I was a hopeless romantic, and now I'd like to think I'm a romantic with some hope. But when I was younger, the concept of the soulmate was this person that I just wanted to latch onto and hold on to and attain so that I could have for the rest of my life. And what that meant was, a lot of the time I would either not let go of relationships when it was the time to let go, or I would shame myself for not having the person who would last for the rest of my life, or I'd feel like I just was not capable because I wasn't attracting someone who would stay around or who I would keep around for long enough. And what that tends to do for a lot of us, either who are single or who've been through divorces, who've been through breakups, is that induces a lot of shame upon ourselves, where we're like, oh my God, I'm never going to meet my soulmate. And now I'm looking at Instagram and Facebook and everybody else, and like they're all smooching and pictures in the wedding dress and all looks great. But here's what I really want to tell you, which will help you transcend why inner work is so important for you and why changing the way you approach relationships is so important for you. A soulmate. Think about that concept. Soulmate. It's not a forever mate. It's not a forever and ever and ever mate or anything else that we think it's supposed to be. A soulmate is simply a mate for what? Your soul. Now, is there a time period that's been defined by it by anybody in any space? I mean, we haven't really thought about it, right? But if you really think about it, someone who comes into your life, even for a really short period of time, but influences you so drastically that it creates a tectonic change for you to want to live better. Now that's really a soulmate. That is someone who, even though they've been into your life for whatever period, a short period of time, has created some feeling of change, a feeling of, whether it was love, whether it was a feeling of challenge, whether it was a feeling of, I need to improve on these things, I need to grow these things, I need to discover my own attachment styles, I need to know how I'm latching onto people or why I'm being so emotionally distant. If it was someone who shocked you in some way or created just this strong feeling inside you which gave you an opportunity to grow, that's your soulmate. I want to tell you a little story. I dated a woman many years ago. This is probably like, I can't remember how long ago, but it was a long time ago. And she and I had this instant attraction, right? Very intense attraction. And a lot of you know about the push-pull. I've talked about it a lot, where a lot of our stress hormones are misunderstood for like sexual chemistry and sexual drive, where we're like, oh my God, this person, I want them and it's not good for me, and I go back and forth, and you keep attacking that and and you make this desire the priority that takes over you, when in truth, it's actually a body telling you that perhaps it may or may not be safe. Either way, me and this person had a strong relationship and attraction, but inside my head, I knew this person was not good for me on the consistent basis for like a long-term goal. Now, my ego didn't want to accept that. And for most of us, our ego doesn't want to accept that space, right? Because we really want to hold on to someone, we really want to connect with them and make them mean something to us. Because if it doesn't work out, we break up, we feel like, oh my God, we're not good enough. So we hold on to these people and we attempt to convince them of our love. Now, in this scenario with this person, she was older than me. She had children. She lived in a place that, I met her in, but I wanted to move to a whole different place, set up my life in New York, and it just wasn't possible. And yet, I had this strong attraction for this woman. And I couldn't understand why I was so, for the lack of a better word, attached to this person. Now, as I started working through my own attachment wounds, I started to recognize, okay, I have a huge history of like a wound or a pain with my own mother, and I'm unconsciously trying to convince a woman who's older, who already has children, because my mom had like 4 children older than me, to try and convince a woman who's older that I'm still worthy of love. And so that was my attempt to be able to show this person and ultimately get her to say, yes, I'll do whatever you want to do, and I'll go wherever you want and love you. And then you know what my ego would have done? It would have said, yeah, you know what, this relationship's not interesting for me anymore. That's actually how this journey generally goes, with the push and pull that we jump into. But here's something else that's important. This relationship, because I couldn't have it, and oh, sorry, I just whacked my computer, and because it went in this back and forth, it kept challenging me. It kept plaguing me. When the relationship finally ended, my heart was so hurt. And like I said, this was many years ago, just when I was like touching and getting into like the emotional, like I was on my own journey, but I hadn't got into like the concepts of attachments really. But when I got into that space and I started looking at that, I started looking at the healing that it needed, because I was like, why do I need this woman so bad to make me feel good about myself? Why do I need this, validation from this person to be so like to for me to even recognize myself? And when I wasn't with her, there was this massive pain that was there. So I said, okay, I have to go in and dig deep. But that meant disconnecting from the person. And believe it or not, and this is an honest piece of truth I'm telling you, this was a tip that I learned from Guy Winch, who's an amazing psychologist in Germany, who put out a TED talk saying how to heal a broken heart. And I remember seeing this like more than 10 years ago when I watched it. And he talked about how sometimes to move on past the person, you have to drop all the reasons why that person's not good for you, and all the reasons why they're just not healthy for you. And so you look at that to be able to step on past it. And when I was doing that, I noticed one thing. I subconsciously in the moment started to dislike the person, right? Because that was the only way for me to actually, I was so attached, that was the only way for me to be able to separate and move on. And so as I did that, I started to say in my heart, like, maybe this person was so bad, they caused me so much pain, this is just not good for me. I want to have a family, I want to really be with someone, and yet, why was I attracting this? Why was I holding on to this? Why didn't she tell me to leave? Even though she had children, she knew what I wanted. Why didn't she do it? So my ego created all of these mechanisms to like dislike and disconnect from this person. Until one day I started solving my wounds on my own. And I went in like a hermit phase. I cut off myself from everything. I just started digging deep and I found the healing to my wounds. And that's when I realized, if it wasn't for that woman, if it wasn't for everything I had in that space, including the pain that I felt of the broken heart, and this is something tremendously important for all of you, if it wasn't for that pain of the broken heart, I would not want to do any of the work that I did. I would not want to learn how to heal on my own. I would not travel and go to people learning and studying and healing and looking at the attachments and diving deep and getting into therapy. I would not do any of that. And I wouldn't be here offering this to you either. And so for me, what I realized was that person actually was my soulmate. Was she the person I was meant to spend the rest of my life with? No, she wasn't, obviously. And it's interesting because I was reading a book. I love biographies because I love learning through people's experiences. So I'm reading about Steve Jobs right now and how he was actually at one point in his life madly in love with a woman who he knew wasn't good for him, and she knew he wasn't good for her. But they had such a strong, intense connection. Now, he was attempting to be a spiritual person back then, even at that time. This is Steve Jobs, by the way, the guy who made the phone that most of you are actually like looking into at this point. He was a romantic. And as I study him, I initially, when I read the book, I thought he probably identified as an avoidant. Now I see he's probably more disorganized. But as I looked into it, I found that he admitted at one point, and he said, I had mad, like, feelings, like strong feelings. I was madly in love with this woman. Was she the person who was good for me for the rest of my life? No. But what I realized is she was exactly what I needed right then. And that is a soulmate. A soulmate is someone who enters your life. Like, how many dates have we gone on? Let's be honest, right? How many dates have we gone on in our lives where we've gone to, like, either we meet someone at lunch, coffee, blah, 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 and you're just like, this is just not inspiring me. Like, I just don't feel challenged. I just don't feel great. You don't even feel interested. Forget feeling in love. You don't even really feel interested. And those just fall away from your memory. They just fall away from your mind without you even noticing or holding on to them. But then think about the other ones. Even the people that you've been so attached to before, whether it's from your anxious attachment or whether you've experienced someone trying to attach to you and you're like an avoidant in any way, if those people created enough of like a feeling inside you of like, even if it was sadness, it was loneliness, it was pain, it was disconnection, whatever it is, if they created enough of that it made you want to do something good for yourself, which is to either study the work, go to therapy, start healing, look into your own wounds. Like if you're an avoidant, I know so many avoidants who are my friends, who are guys, athletes. I used to be a professional athlete. A lot of athletes who are like, yeah, bro, so tough. No one really like they wouldn't really dive deep into their emotions, and yet they all met someone in their lives who was trying to love them, and they just didn't know how to like feel and accept love. That's a huge problem with the avoidant. And so they chased them away only later to say, I have never had someone see me like that ever before, and I was so afraid that I chased them away. But then that person is who's now impressed and imprinted into their minds. And so now, because of that, they're like, I think I deserve to live differently than I've been living. I can't go on living like this. I can't go on like this with my kids, with my parents, my family, with my partners. I have to create change. Think about how fucking valuable that moment of connection was with the person, and whether it's an avoidant, anxious, nobody gives a fuck, with that relationship, that it made you think more than what you were thinking today. It made you feel more than what you're feeling today. It made you want to be more than who you were in that moment. That, if it can inspire you to make change in your life, that is impactful. Those are the people who you remember, and those are soulmates. The soulmate doesn't have to be the like beautiful butterfly person who comes into your life and is like, yes, I'm perfect for you, and I'm just going to nurture you and support you and create you, and like, let's have many little babies together. That could be a soulmate that you have, but we have many soulmates. Now, why am I saying this to you? I'm saying this to you because of two reasons. One, again, I am in the industry where I am trying to help people create better relationships for themselves. And the opposite of creating a good relationship for yourself is when you beat yourself up continuously for not being in a good relationship. That is not the best way to be able to move past anything. So the way to be able to recognize then, okay, I have not met this lifelong partner, or I have not had this marriage that my parents approve of, or this relationship that everybody is like signed up on. But I have had people in my life who've created very strong change. And when I sit in late at night and I'm sitting by myself and I'm just thinking about it, that person made me and pushed me, whether they knew they were doing it or not, whether just by their existence, just by their connection, to be a much bigger and better version of me and myself. Then that person is your soulmate, because without them, you may not have elevated yourself to be who you are today. Now, I'm going to be honest. Sometimes this can be tough. I just saw a question that was thrown in here. Someone asked about trauma. Someone asked about abuse. And you know, this sounds tough. We're talking about, and this goes back to deep Buddhist principles, okay? So don't shoot me. I wish I came up with it, but I honestly don't have the level of wisdom that Buddha had. But he used to say how even a stone, when he walked to the peepal tree, which is the tree under which Buddha used to meditate, and it's beautiful. It lives in India, it lives in the Northeast as well. When he used to walk there and he stepped on a stone, and the stone would cut his foot, and he would walk further forward, he said to his disciples, he said, I am grateful for the stone, because it is the stone who taught me how I'm not meant to walk on this path. It is the stone who taught me to look down. It is the stone who taught me to improve my awareness. Now, am I one to say that, oh no, we should have more stones in your life? It doesn't mean that. But it means if you have come across a stone, if you have experienced that pain, if you've experienced even an unconscious version of trauma that's happened to you, it is the empowered soul that knows how to take that to improve their lives. Now, you can't just step into being an empowered soul in just a moment. And this is another thing with soulmates, right? Is that if you've gone through massive heartbreak, here's what I want to tell you. What is actually holding on to your ex, holding on to the partner who left, holding on to the partner you pushed away, holding on to even the trauma, is the ego. And the reason the ego does it is because it can identify as being someone who's hurt. And if you're hurt, you're not capable simultaneously while you're feeling pain to stand up and say, I'm going to make change. That is how victimization and empowerment cannot exist simultaneously. So what the ego does is the ego attempts to suppress you and attempts to tell you, okay, you are not going to be able to like create great change. You're not going to find the person you love. You're not going to do anything because you're hurt, you're wounded, you don't deserve love, any of those. Now, the stone can also do those things. Trauma and pain can also do those things. And you know what? Rightfully so. For those of you who aren't aware about the physiological response to trauma, when you go through anything, think about when the body goes through anything heavy, right? It gets beaten, it gets hurt or whatever. The first thing it does is it coils up. It coils up like that and it protects itself because it's trying to protect what the internal organs and the vital organs in the front, here, the heart, stomach, lungs, etc. So it coils up, and that's what we call the victimized position. Now, emotional trauma creates the same reaction in the mind. It coils you up like that. But when you're in that position where you're coiled and you're protected, which you need to be in when you're feeling hurt, you can't stand up and be like, I'm brave, I'm strong, I can take on the world. The problem is when that stage of protectionism gets perpetuated, when it goes on way too long, when it just locked and frozen in that state of being hurt and wounded and coiled up, and we're not actually able to get out of it, then we're not able to stand up, see, and live our lives, even if the threat and the danger has gone. So the ego starts to tell you the threat's going to come back, the danger's going to come back, and it keeps us coiled up in there. Now, again, how is that related to a soulmate is the same thing. If your heart is broken, and I'm talking about, when we talk about soulmates, guys, and we're talking about also abusers and stuff, I'm talking about from a partner-like perspective, right? Now, a soulmate can be anybody. It can be your brother, sister, friend, anybody. But what we're talking about in relationships primarily is a soulmate from a partner perspective. So that person or whoever you're with or in that space, if your heart was broken or it hurt you a lot or the pain that came out of it was so traumatic and painful and hurtful, you can recognize that the ego sometimes wants to stay attached to them, find ways to text them back, find ways to bring them back in, find ways to to say, no, but they did this and they're okay. They meant well. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of us lead back to patterns. But when you accept what happened in the situation, you accept the result that came out of it, but more importantly, you accept the truth that you have to work with, then now you're more capable of saying, okay, that partnership did this to me. It hurt me a lot. This person may have also hurt me a lot. The person may not, but my heart was still hurt. But at the end of the day, what's required for me? I need to create change. And change can be small. Change can be tectonic. In my life, change needed to be motherfucking tectonic because until that woman, I had attracted 5 women in a row who were exactly the same pattern. And the pain, and obviously nothing had helped me create enough change. Nothing had told me, dude, you got to get out of this. You got to create that change. You got to step away from this. It was that relationship, because I was so in love with that woman. It was that pain of that relationship that finally broke me down and said, you need to create that change. And at that point, like I told you, I was hurt and I was bitter and upset with the person. And after I started to heal, I realized how much I had of healing to do, how much growth I had in my own life, how much potential I had to live. And therefore, once I did that, I started to attract a whole different set of partnerships in my life. The feeling, the connection, the elevation, the security, the trust, the safety, all of that elevated because of that relationship. And that's when I realized in my life, I was so grateful for that person and for them entering my space and for me being in that relationship, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to create the change that I needed. So to reel it back in, guys, I want to tell all of you, your idea of a soulmate from me to you should not have to be, I need to have this ideal type of marriage, ideal type of relationship that everybody associates and approves of. That's also really dangerous, because that comes under what we call societal conditioning and programming, where we are now living a life based on like, oh my God, social media says this, I need to have it. My parents say this, I need to have it. That's when I'll be happy. You need to look at your own life. You need to look at feedback. So feedback is what you see and how you respond to everything in and around you and how it responds to you. You need to look at your relationships and the ones that you're in. And more than anything, you need to take the feedback of growth. You need to take the feedback of challenge. You need to take the feedback of where you could elevate your life. And once you start doing that, you'll start getting excited for what comes into your life. Even when it's challenging, when it's difficult, when it's triggering, you'll be excited about it, because it all gives you an opportunity to live better, to live more wholesomely, to attract better, to see things better, to be more in love, because all of them are inspiring you to grow and to change and to evolve. So remember, a soulmate, and this is my honest opinion, a soulmate is, and just to answer your question, is not just someone who forces you to be better. It's someone who comes into your life and makes massive change, makes change internally, whatever that change means for you, however it goes. The reason I harped upon this concept of better is because sometimes we we reject a lot of the people who come into our life just because of pain. But a lot of those people may have made massive influence in us being who we are today. So remember, your soulmate is someone who just makes big change in your life. And my biggest tip to you is don't hold on to them more than you should. That's my biggest tip to you. If you notice that you're starting to do that, and how you'll notice it is because they'll start resisting, you'll start feeling disappointed and hurt. If you're noticing you're doing that, remember, that's your ego. And that is not your soulmate. Your ego is trying to hold on to them and try and handcuff them to you or you to them to say, I want to stay true. I want to stay with this. This is what identifies me. But remember, if you let them go, the lessons and the growth that can come from it will be so much more. And all of you, I said this to someone the other day when they were asking me for some help. It wasn't even a client. It was just someone I was talking to. Maybe I don't know, I went out somewhere or something. And by the end of the conversation, obviously, like, I bear down into people's like stories and souls. Sometimes when you're out socially, it can be a dangerous thing. But I came to this point where it was so needed for me to say to her, you deserve love. The same as I do. The same as anybody does. The same as the person who's ultra successful at a relationship, and the same as the person who doesn't have one. We all deserve love because it's a natural emotion, actually, that's created by discipline, commitment, people showing up, success. It's a feeling. But what's holding or limiting the feeling is a lot of our trauma, a lot of our stories, and a lot of our conditioning. Basically, it's a lot of bullshit that's trying to tell us we're not worthy. That's the ultimate story. And so we attach onto various ideas of what we think is love. Validation, proof, the push-pull, any of those feelings. When you start to really tap into yourself and create awareness of who you are, not only do you recognize the type of love you really want to have, but you also start to see that you deserve it. And as you start to see that you deserve it, even if doesn't fit in a box that everybody else says is good, fits in a box that everybody else says is approved of, if you recognize that it's taking you in a direction where you're moving upwards for your own soul, for your own connection, for your own experience, that's all that matters. And then if you open your eyes more and you open your heart more, for sure, you will see your soulmate come into your life. Because your soulmate, like I said, there are many during the period of time. But if you open your heart, and if you're conscious about it, and if you're aware about it, you'll invite them into your life. If you like this video, click below to like, to share, to subscribe, to do all of those things, and follow this page, because we have so many more videos with this kind of magic, so to speak, inner work magic coming out. But make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. And more importantly, if you found value in this, share this with all your friends. Much love to you.